For over 70 years, the Walt Disney Studios has won the hearts of audiences with the most enchanting, delightful, and lovable characters the world has ever known. The tradition...
Hey, that's not Simba!
Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Dragon's Library. So today, I decided I don't want to talk about the new Lilo and Stitch movie. I know it's been out for like a month now, but this review's been taking a while to get out. So instead, we are talking about the OG Lilo and Stitch movie. Not the new one, the original from 2002.
His name is Stitch.
Great! He's loose!
He's taken a police cruiser!
He took the red one.
Now, I have done this a few times with a few other things, most notably Scooby-Doo, which is still my best video. I'm hoping this one will do even better. But the reason I want to talk about the original one is because I just don't want to give the new thing any more time and attention than it already has. In addition, the Lilo and Stitch original movie means so much to me. I really hate having to say original movie. I'm just going to say Lilo and Stitch and just know that I mean the original. Now, I feel like everyone knows the story of Lilo and Stitch, but on the off chance you don't, I will try and describe it as quickly as possible in as few sentences as possible. So let's see if I can avoid rambling about it. Lilo and Stitch focuses on a Hawaiian girl named Lilo who's being raised by her struggling older sister Nani. Their lives drastically change after an alien genetic experiment named 626 crash lands on the planet after fleeing capture. In order to hide, 626, now named Stitch, is adopted by Lilo. However, while initially a ploy, over time Stitch finds himself torn between his destructive instincts and a newfound desire to become a real part of this new family. And that's about as simple as I can make it. Seriously, if you haven't seen this movie, I mean the original, just watch it. It's one of the best things Disney ever made. Although it's not just Disney, because like any good project, it had a creative mind behind it. So, Lilo and Stitch was originally an idea by Chris Sanders. The character of Stitch was designed to be a part of a children's book pitch for a book he wanted to make back in 1985. Anyway, afterwards he went to work for Disney. Sanders started on the Rescuers Down Under movie, but soon found himself working on some of the more important movies of the Disney Renaissance, such as Beauty and the Beast, Lion King, and even was the story head for Mulan. He shared this role actually with Dean DeBlois as co-story heads, and you will definitely be hearing more about him because he also worked on Lilo and Stitch. So, the story goes that a short while after working on Mulan, while Dean DeBlois was working on Atlantis: The Lost Empire, Chris attended a retreat in Vermont. This retreat had been hosted by Michael Eisner. He was the then CEO of Disney. And during this time, the executives were all discussing how they wanted to move away from larger, somewhat risky adaptations of existing myths and folktales, and they wanted to get more into like smaller projects. This is because Disney's movies were getting more and more expensive, and while on average making less than those that came before. So everything up to and including The Lion King as a part of like the Disney Renaissance had a budget of under $50 million. You can see the numbers on screen. Although Lion King was the most expensive at $45 million, it made over $900 million globally. But from then on, starting with Pocahontas, the trend towards more expensive movies can be seen as each movie tends to be more and more expensive than the one before it, but none of them ever topped Lion King's charge. $45 million was like the most they could put into a movie and get good returns, it seemed. Now, I think The Lion King was just a really, really good movie. Doesn't really matter on its budget. I mean, it looks good, of course, but that's only half of it. Still, the executives wanted to experiment with multiple smaller budget movies that were of lower risk while also allowing for some greater creative freedom for the writers and animators who worked on it. And everyone wanted it to be Sanders. So Thomas Schumacher was quoted as saying, "The whole thing started in 1997 at Michael Eisner's family farm in Vermont. We were picked apples, we carved pumpkins, we talked about animation. The idea was, let's make the Dumbo for our generation, a director-based film that wasn't huge and complicated, and therefore would give the animators more control over it." It even goes on to say about Chris Sanders, 17 years prior to me even pitching Lilo and Stitch, I wanted to do a children's book. This is a reference, by the way, to what happened before, what I mentioned earlier. It was supposed to be about this little creature who lived in a forest, and it was a bit of a monster with no real explanation as to where it came from. It was all about how he found a way to belong, but after doing a couple of drawings, I realized the idea was going to be very difficult to squeeze down, so I abandoned it. Schumacher was quoted as saying that Chris was an extraordinary person. He worked on I Can't Wait to Be Kings, and was even the story head of Mulan, like I mentioned earlier. So everyone really liked it, and he was even directly quoted as saying, "Everyone wants this next film to be you," to Chris, which was kind of a huge honor. Like, all the executives were like, this is the guy we want to pitch our smaller projects to. Of course, this brings us to the story of the actual movie. Now, originally, the Lilo and Stitch movie was supposed to involve Stitch crash landing in the wilderness and bonding with animals. Interestingly, Chris Sanders got to do a very similar version of this recently when he adapted Wild Robot. Even though that was actually based on a book, it was remarkably similar to Chris's idea for Lilo Stitch. However, in one of the only instances of higher-up interfering with the movie, they had it changed to what we know now. So Sanders had originally pitched the film for this, forced animal bonding thing, and Schumacher was like, we don't want him to be in a living world full of animals who don't know what an alien is. An alien among animals is not as remarkable as an alien among humans. The forest is just green on green on green. Visually imagine color. He had initially suggested Tahiti, but Sanders had a map of Hawaii up on his wall. He had been to a vacation there recently, and his whole idea was, wait a minute, why couldn't I just set it there? Now, this is the part that's kind of interesting. The thing you need to know about Lilo & Stitch is that it was a very small project with a limited team and almost complete creative freedom. Basically, an artist's dream. Chris had experienced some frustration in the past when it came to executives, particularly Eisner, who had occasionally been too exhausted to pay attention during screenings, and then acted confused when he missed an important role and didn't know what was going on. A good example of this was a interview about the showing of The Lion King. Basically, Sanders says that Michael Eisner had clearly had a difficult morning, and during the showing, he wasn't really paying attention or taking notes, and then he kept putting his head down, and during the scene where Mufasa's ghost appears and Simba decides to go back home, he missed it, and then he's like, why did Simba just decide to go back home? It's like, you missed the entire thing of his dad's ghost coming back to tell him to go back. So, being able to not deal with that bullshit was apparently very, very appealing. And when I say basically no oversight, I really do mean it. Here's a quote. That's the kind of thing that Lilo and Stitch never went through. Whenever Tom would go to his numerous meetings on the main lot and Michael Eisner was in there, they'd be going down their agenda, he'd say, so what's this little Lilo and Stitch thing? And Tom would be like, oh, it's just this thing we're doing. It's not really ready yet, but when it's ready, we'll show you. Again, I like Michael, but the film defied conventions, and they would have tried likely to put it into a mold they were more familiar with. How do you sit there and explain, well, I think it's really cool if the girl feeds peanut butter to a fish? I quite frankly love this quote, so I still can't believe Disney let them make this thing. Like, they gave these people a bunch of money and said, do what you want with it. And they just let the creators work without butting in, and they got a good result out of it. This kind of thing would never happen today. It was this weird mix of the executives all wanted this, they had a good creative lead, and they were willing to step back and give them freedom, which is very rare. And I really like the results, because they show that when you let the creators work, oftentimes the final product feels more genuine as a result. Sanders, we were the equivalent of a spy plane that was being built in a secret hangar with a very elite group of people. And that's another reason Florida was magic, because no one knew what was going on in Florida. Lisa Pohl, an associate producer, would follow up with, being in Florida, you were away from the mothership. If you needed support from LA, you had to holler a little louder, but that gave us freedom. There were definitely some things we did differently, and when LA found out, they didn't like that we were doing it differently, but they couldn't argue with the results. And that's what gets us into the animation. So one of the things they really did differently in the film was the animation. See, Lilo & Stitch was originally given to Sanders in part because several executives really liked his storybook art style. So building on this, the team wanted to revive the classical animation techniques that Disney had been known for in its early years, such as their watercolor backgrounds. However, while the backgrounds in animation do look fantastic since it was a smaller movie, shortcuts were needed. One of these was an extremely limited use of shadows and lighting on the characters. See some examples on screen and look for any shadowing. For those of you who don't draw, shadowing and lighting can really make your art pop. Shadows and highlights give characters a feeling of depth and texture. I can actually use my own work as an example. This is two copies of one of my thumbnails, one before shading and one after shading. You can really feel the difference. So yeah, it makes stuff look really good. And to be honest, it's almost essential for drawing. Unless you're the animator for Lilo & Stitch, because I never realized that they were able to make such amazing character designs with basically no shadowing. Don't get me wrong, there are moments of it, but for the most part, it's just flat colors and they make it look so good. A lot of the designs were also simplified to make animating easier. We couldn't afford things like shadows or details. A simple detail like a back pocket on a pair of jean shorts or a logo on a t-shirt had to be removed just because it took so much longer to draw them. And we couldn't afford shadows, Du Bois says. So you'll notice so much of Lilo & Stitch takes place in the shade of the trees and the bushes and whatnot. We saved those for special moments where we needed them. And there were moments with shading, like he said, but even then, not everything in the scene was often shaded. A good example of this is the opening scene with the Galactic Council. At the very beginning of the movie, you can see that the main councilwoman is highlighted by this beam of light. When they flat back to Jumba and Stitch, they have a few highlights on them. There's shadowing that makes the councilwoman stand out, but even the characters next to her on the council have basically no shadowing at all. They're just flat colors. And it still looks amazing. On top of all of that, they did the whole movie without any CG. That was a big deal at the time. After Pixar's success, CGI was being shoved into every single movie, but not Lilo and Stitch. And you just know that if the marketing team had been involved in this, they would have forced some CG down his throats. In fact, Schumacher has a really good quote about this. By the time the movie came out, there was a lot of frustration it wasn't CG. The marketing people asked, well, how do we release a movie? It's not CG. There was even a suggestion by a very important player that we do the commercial in CG. I said, that seems a little dishonest. The movie worked because it's not CG. You show me a leaf from Pocahontas, Hercules, Mulan, Lilo and Stitch, a leaf, and I'll tell you what movie it came from. Because if it was Hercules, it has a Gerard scarf spin on it. And if it's Pocahontas, it has a seam going up. And there's one color here and one color there. Lilo's gonna be watercolor. They'll all look different. There's a sameness that you can get unless people really push the boundaries. Having worked on both, this film was such a celebration of hand-drawn animation. I kept being told by the publicist, nobody cares about the watercolors. I said, we're going to teach them what it is. We went to the Cannes Film Festival to promote it. Clark, Dean, Chris, me, Roy, and Patty flew us there on a Airroy, a private 737 they owned. I think we put 500 journalists through a class where they got to learn how to watercolor paint. They all got a kit with exactly 4 colors of paint you needed, and you had to float your paint on the wet paper. It was amazing. Honestly, Schumacher sounds like a really cool executive to have worked with. He seemed to have gotten that films, while they do need to be profitable in order to justify their cost, do need to have some kind of artistic vision behind them and was really willing to promote it, which is really cool of him. Of course, it wasn't just the animation that set this movie apart. The setting was a big draw. Now, one thing the team was determined to do was capture the feeling and beauty of the islands of Hawaii. The team went on a research trip where they took in the island's locations and colors, painting recreations of what they saw in order to make sure they got it right. Here are some quotes. Our artists were traveling all over the place in Hawaii with their easels and their paints, because a photograph would never work. You have to go on site and paint the actual things so you come back with the actual colors. They were collecting stuff that became the vibe of the film, making very careful observations architecturally. What the curves look like, what the window frames look like. Sluter was saying, the sand is very rich iron, you walk on the beat, and all of a sudden it looks like a giant dropped a bag of potatoes, but they're lava rocks and they're just piled all over. One day we were sitting on the beach at night having a dinner by the ocean, the sun was setting, the waves were coming in, the water was turquoise, but the sea foam was pink. How can the white foam be affected that much by the color of the sky but not the water? You see in the surfing scene we did that. Most people would just done the water with white foam or grayish blue foam. We made it pink because that's what we saw. And that wasn't just an observation of the place itself and its visuals, it also related to the people of Hawaii as well and its culture. The voice of Nani was actually a local Hawaiian, and she was very impressed with the results of the animators. She said, I just thought this is so beautiful. The paintings of these places in Hawaii feel like actual specific places, not broad-stroke renderings of some nondescript tropical island, you know? The houses are like the houses I grew up around. Nani looks like a local girl would look like. The sturdiest of her legs and her body, she's not Cinderella painted brown. I love that Chris and Dean were cognizant of what they were putting in front of the world. It was so ahead of its time on so many levels. Now, Lilo and Stitch being set in Hawaii was a pretty core part of it from the very beginning, and the creators were determined to make sure they were faithful in its depictions, like I've said earlier. So they made sure to speak with the people who actually lived there as they tried to get a detailed picture of what it was like to actually live on the islands and not just visit. Dean Du Bois's quote is saying, there was a lot of careful observation of the folks we met, and trying to channel that regular life in Hawaii feel into the movie so that it didn't just come across as people in hula skirts standing on a beach like Blue Hawaii. Blue Hawaii, for those of you who don't know, was a musical from 1961 starring Elvis Presley. Sanders said, Dean and I have no business telling a Hawaiian story. You can tell stories like that, but then you have to find people who do have a business there, so we reached out to as many people as we could that lived there. This included a variety of things. One of the most notable for me was this time where they visited a school and introduced themselves as animators from Disney. They talked about how they used to work on like The Little Mermaid, and the kids were all very excited to see them. And of course, they also wanted to introduce hula into the movie. Now, this gets us into the soundtrack, and before I get into the hula stuff, let's talk about the other things Lilo and Stitch is known for.
Look.
We can go on together with suspicious minds.
The Elvis songs. If you've watched this movie, you have been singing those songs. So Elvis songs are almost an iconic part of Lilo and Stitch. They're all throughout the soundtrack. Lilo was big into him, even in character, so it was a pretty core part of the movie, and a lot of its vibe comes from Elvis's songs alongside the natural Hawaiian songs. Now, I'm not sure if it's the first time I personally heard Elvis, but I can say it's the earliest time I can remember. The reason for this heavy Elvis inspiration was pretty simple. Chris Sanders was a huge Elvis fan, and that's it. The creator of the movie was a really big Elvis fan. He wanted Elvis music. They weren't sure they would get the rights, but when the estate said, yeah, you can use it, they were extremely excited. The other part, though, is the traditional Hawaiian music and the hula dancing. You don't mess with hula, Sanders said. You know, some people treat hula as this sort of silly thing. Gilligan's Island, they'll dress up in hula skirts, do some sort of mockery of the hula. That's how Hollywood has treated it. What we learned very quickly from everyone we were consulting is that you don't do that. So Sanders and DuBois also wanted to use this local music and style, but they wanted to make sure they did it respectfully. To Chris and I, music was half the equation. It does all the heavy lifting emotionally. So we said, whatever budget you give us, we know it will be less than the typical feature at Disney, but make sure we get a top-notch composer. The top of our list was Alan Silvestri. He was so curious that he needed to start scouring everything he could find in traditional Hawaiian music. This led into a quote from Alan, who said, we wanted to bring in this more traditional Hawaiian influence to some of the songs, and we discovered there's very deep sacred aspect to real traditional Hawaiian music. It's very cared for tradition from Hawaii. They ended up getting a children's choir at the Kamehameha school to sing the opening song, and my personal favorite Hawaiian roller coaster ride too. God, I love that song. I'm gonna play it right now if I wouldn't give me a copyright strike. As for hula, they managed to find a local hula instructor who was willing to work with the production, but it wasn't easy. His name was Mark. I cannot pronounce that last name, so I'm going to put it on screen because I don't want to butcher it. He was a hula master who was living in the Bay Area. Silvestri. He had a storefront in some shopping area like many churches do now. That's where his students would congregate, meet, and do their work together. DuBois. Mark was considered to be a bit of a rebel because he would take these old chants and his versions of them had a lot of melody and harmony and breaks in the tradition that were, I think, considered sacrilege by some purists, but to others, he was bringing old Hawaiian music to a new generation. It brought this amazing breadth and scope and very cinematic quality to the music. Silvestri continues, Mark was very guarded, as he should have been. He didn't want a bunch of commercial knuckleheads walking on sacred ground with their nonsense. He was very protective, and it took us a while to win him over. So, they had the music ready, they had this great animation ready, they had an awesome team, and they were doing amazing work. So, let's skip ahead towards near the end of the production now. The movie was nearing completion at the end of 2001, a year before its release in 2002. But unfortunately, real-world events would conspire to give them a little speed bump. Just as they were finishing up with the last few scenes and touching everything up, making sure the marketing material was ready, 9/11 happened. And I know what you're thinking, Ramble, what does that have to do with Lilo and Stitch? Well, for those of you who haven't seen like the bonus features on a DVD, at the climax of the movie, where Stitch ends up having to pilot a massive spaceship to save Lilo while flying between mountains, that was a redone scene. The original version, Stitch, well, let me just show you.
Aloha!
Hold on! Okay, it's showtime! This is it!
Yeah, Stitch hijacked a Boeing 747, which is extra yikes, and flew it between buildings in downtown Honolulu. So they had to do a quick redo of that scene, and that's why Jumbo's ship has turbines. But surprisingly, even with this last minute change, the movie still finished with enough money left in the budget for this cute montage of the family rebuilding their house, which is one of my favorite scenes in the movie, and the team really had a lot of fun with it. In conclusion, with all that I've shown you today, I hope you can agree that Lilo and Stitch is a goddamn masterpiece, and it is a miracle it ever got made. Sanders, we were in the right place at the right time. Tom Schumacher was there to protect this film. So many people were in the right place at the right time who helped us out in Hawaii. I just imagine how many times this could have gone wrong. It almost makes me freak out now just thinking about how many near misses this thing probably had. It was like bowling a strike. You're like, it's going to make it, it's going to make it. And then you hit that and they never happen again. Du Bois and Sanders would continue to work together on projects in the future, particularly How to Train Your Dragon, my actual favorite movie of all time. And even recently, Sanders worked on Wild Robot, which, like I mentioned earlier, had a very similar premise to this original pitch of the movie. But even with all the stuff they've done, and my personal love of How to Train Your Dragon for obvious reasons, Lilo and Stitch remains an all-time classic, one of the best movies Disney ever made, mostly because the executives were forced to stay the hell away and the marketing department was told to shut up and do their job. But at the same time, it was because of an executive that this passionate creator got to make it, and the marketing team had fun. The trailers show Stitch crashing into classic Disney movies as the rebel child and the different one, showing how unique, and using that to actually advertise the movie more. It was this rare moment, I think, during Disney's transitional period into what they are today, where they were allowing the creators to do their job, the executives were doing their job by actually promoting good projects with lower budgets that would actually make them more money in the end, and the marketing department, for all its BS about CG, did their job very well. It was this really, really interesting merger between the business and artistic side of movie creation and animation that we rarely see. It was a passion project, but it also became one of Disney's most iconic franchises. Stitch is still huge in the parks. I had a ton of Stitch merch growing up, so he's still selling very well. And even this live action abomination shows that it's still a very popular brand for Disney. This is an iconic movie and well worth your time, even over 20 years later. So, yeah. Moving on to the announcements, I know this movie has been delayed so many times. For reference, I've rewrote and re-recorded this script like 3 times while writing it, because every time I try to put down my words on this movie, I never quite got it the way I wanted it to. But I think this is about as close as I'm gonna get, and I have a limit on myself for 3 rewrites at most, because if I don't, it won't just take a month for this to get out, it'll take forever. So I hope you guys like this movie. I am streaming some stuff. I have no idea what I'm even streaming by the time this comes out, so we'll see. I think I will probably be streaming Wuchang still around that time, and I might be streaming Witch Spring R, which was a recommendation from Dawn Seeker on my Discord channel. Wow, she's so adorable, but yet so evil at the same time. It's a very weird combination. If you want to go to the Discord channel, seriously check it out. We talk about all types of movies and shows and video games and all types of fun stuff. And you can just message me and ask me about some stuff you want me to review, and maybe I'll watch or stream it or something like that. It'd be really fun. So definitely check out that link in the description, and I will see you all there. Finally, we have the out card. There is a subscribe board. Click on it, go to my channel, subscribe. It would really mean a lot. There's a video you recommend, and hopefully the next video doesn't take us long to get out. See you guys next time. Bye.